Sorry, I didn't make an intro slide. I don't feel like I should have to make an intro slide for a demo theater, right? I'm going to do a demo. This is developing LRS solutions with Esri Roads and Highways. Is that what everybody's here for? Great. My name's Tom Brenneman. I work on the transportation practice at Esri. Spent a lot of time working with roads and highways. I see some familiar faces out there with regard to that. But roads and highways and really any kind of solutions focused on state DOTs. How many people here have used the Esri Roads and Highways product? OK, about half. All right, great. Well, I want to go through a couple of different scenarios, and I'm going to try and, gosh, already down to only 23 minutes left. Go through some different customization patterns that you can follow with the Esri Roads and Highways product. And I'm going to start off by just kind of giving you a quick intro to this application. This is the application. Does anyone know what it's called? What's that? RCE, or we renamed it to Event Editor. Yeah, so very good. Plus, it says it right up there at the top if you can. My questions aren't usually very hard. All right, so this is a web application that allows you to, as the name implies, edit events. I'll zoom in here on some data just so you get an idea of how this application works. I'm going to zoom in on this location. I'm going to turn on something like lanes. So this is a lane event on top of my roadway. And if I want to do an edit, maybe change some of the characteristics along that line, I'm going to edit the linear events for that line. So I'll open that. There we go. And I might just go in here and click and say, all right, I want to edit that. I want to edit that particular route. And I might go from the start of that route. You can't really see it, but there's a green cross right down there. It puts in the measure, and I can start typing in a second measure. So if I type in a second measure there, it'll show me the location of where that edit is going to occur. Let me make it a little bit. I'll do 2 miles, zoom into that. So that's the section of the roadway that I'm going to edit. And you might be thinking, well, what am I going to edit? Well, that's on the next panel here. This is a configuration of the different events that I'm editing for this section of the roadway. So maybe it's my job to input the data for this section of the roadway. I might start at the beginning of the road, put in my measurement information. By the way, if sorry for that zoom failure there. If you did want to just click on the map, you can do that too, and you can do things like intersection offsets and all kinds of fun things like that. So if I want to do a road intersection offset, I could say, oh, I want to click on that road there, and I might want to say, well, this edit is going to go 500 feet south of that intersection. Okay, so this is the LRS primer on roads and highways. And then I can go in and put some attributes for that section of road. So I'm going to click there, pull in some attributes for that one. It's existing. It's currently 45 miles per hour. We're going to change that. This is the route I take to the airport. So 70. And we're going to add in a couple of lanes. So a number of lanes, we're going to make that 4 for that section of road. And that's how that's kind of the process, all right? So simple web editor for updating events along the roadway. That's what RCE is, or the event editor is all about. Now, what if I wanted to call this application from a separate application? Maybe I have another business system or another application that maybe has some linear referencing data, and I want to link to the event editor. Well, you can do that using URL parameters. So here I've got, if you look at the URL right there, there's event editor, and then default.aspx is my event editor. Notice I switch over to this other tab. I just changed default.aspx to launcher.aspx. This is a handy little utility. It comes with the event editor. So when you install it, you copy it to the location, you get this little handy application. you can go there and fill it out. So I can say I wanted to open the Edit tab, and I want to add linear events, and I want to work with the characteristics attribute set, and I don't know, maybe that's it. Notice right down here what it's doing. It's building out the proper URL parameters for launching RCE at that location. All right, so if I open that up, it'll launch the event editor with the edit, what did I say? The edit tab, add linear events, and characteristics. And that's what it's doing. Now it's on the edit tab, and it's going to open up add linear events. All right? It's really cool if you take it one step further and put in a route ID. And now I've got lots of route IDs in here, but then you can have it focus in on just a very specific route ID. I took this kind of one step further, and I put it into, I took those URL parameters and I put them inside of Excel. So here I've got an Excel table that has some route IDs and measure information, right? Well, then I created a couple of columns that use those URL parameters to launch the event editor focused on that specific route ID or this specific measure. So if you look in the calculation up here, you can see that it says default tab equals 2, widget equals 1, and so forth. And that's how it launches. That's how it launches it at that particular location. So if I click on that link, it'll open up the event editor, and it'll feed in that that route ID and measure. So following this pattern, you can use this, you could hyperlink from a web map in ArcGIS Online. Anywhere where you can construct those URL parameters, you can feed this in, and notice that it came in with the from and to measure already defined, because that was defined in the spreadsheet and got passed in via the URL parameters. All right, so that's kind of the first way, and probably the simplest way. I'm going to start simple, and we'll get more sophisticated as the demos go. So that's kind of the simplest way to do some integration and customization with roads and highways. The next way I want to focus on is the web services that are behind this application. So the event editor is completely built on REST web services that are implemented as a server object extension in ArcGIS Server. So in ArcGIS Server, you get, actually, there it is. That's the next tab that I wanted to use. When you publish a linear referencing service in ArcGIS Server, it has a roads and highways capability that you can turn on. You turn on that capability, and it activates that server object extension. Now, this is a shameless plug for our Departments of Transportation GeoNet site. That's all it is. But the other thing I wanted to point out is that within this, there's an Esri Roads and Highways extension. So just geonet.esri.com groups Departments of Transportation. And then we have specific areas that are kind of DOT focused, CAD to GIS, roads and highways, and Survey 123, and mobile. So if I click on Esri Roads and Highways extension, the reason I'm taking you here is, have any of you ever had a hard time finding all the appropriate documentation for one of our products? Anybody here? Yeah, me too. And it kind of started to drive me a little bit crazy. So I went out and I added these shortcuts for all the possible documentation for roads and highways, so you have it all in one place. So if you bookmark this and you go here, you've got all the documentation that you could want. And one of them is, I want to show you here, there's the REST API. So here is the documentation for the REST API that gets deployed with that server object extension that comes with roads and highways. And it's got lots of functions over here. A couple of the ones that you'll use probably the most is geometry to measure and measure to geometry. That's the one that I've seen most people implement How many people here have implemented a web service that does those functions? Yeah. Right. So the good thing about this is it's at least a standard web service call for those functions from roads and highways. So geometry to measure, measure to geometry, those are real popular ones. And you can look on here and it has the syntax for it. Roads and highways does not have a JavaScript API. We just have a REST API. And what that means is if you want to call these services, you have to construct the JSON like it's doing here and pass it into that web service call. It's not that hard to do. There's lots of examples out there of doing it. And that brings me back here to the samples. The JavaScript samples. So back on that handy page that has all the documentation, there's the JavaScript samples. This is the development team puts these samples together, and you can download all of them. And actually, I think in the latest release of the software, they just included these samples in the install. So you might see them as samples folder in the Roads and Highways folder, or you could just download them here. But these are JavaScript examples of these common functions. So, geometry to measure. Here's one where I pass in a point that's clicked in the map, that XY location, and it gives me the route and measure for that location. So that's doing geometry to measure. And likewise, I can do measure to geometry. So here, and if I pass in 2 measures, it'll locate that. It can also do other things like it's quite impressive how well it works in bulk. So some of the other examples, like drag and drop a CSV file of geographic locations. I just take these crash locations, drag and drop them on there, and it finds, it's not surprising that it's finding the locations because it has the X and Y in there, but it doesn't have, if I look in this CSV, that's all it has in it, latitude and longitude. Behind the scenes, that Roads and Highways web service is adding the route ID and measure to all of those points. And you can see if it has bad data as the input, then you get a good error out that tells you what the problem is. Can't find the location. All right, makes sense? So you got the REST API, you got the JavaScript samples that are implementations of that REST API. I want to show you one. I'm supposed to start up Notepad here. I want to just dig in. Yeah, go ahead. I don't know if they are. I've got a sample here that's on the Foro API. They're 3. They're like 3. Yeah, they are old. Yeah. Right. Yep. Right. So this is that code. So this is what is it? And I downloaded. This is 2.6. Yeah. Yeah. It's even older. But it might have been updated since this. This has been sitting on my computer for a long time. So. Right. Yeah. But honestly, absolutely they are old. They need to be updated. I'll pass that along the dev team. But the function calls are identical. It's just the requires that are different. So if you're doing your own development, it's not really that much of a heavy lift. I wanted to show you real quick here. There's the new GeometryPoint. Where's the code? Yeah, there it is. So this is building out the JSON. This is what it looks like. You have your REST endpoint that you're calling against, and you just build up the JSON that you're going to pass into that. You give it a geometry. You pass that geometry into the locations. You give it a tolerance, and tell it you want a response back. And you use Esri.request in order to make that call. And it has a callback function there for when it executes. that's the main pattern that all of these REST web services follow. And like I said, it's exactly the same in Foro. And actually, you know what? How about if I show you a Foro example? Here's one I did for Chicago Metro. They were interested in having a schematics view that looks like this, and tying that to a geographic view that looks like this for their rail lines. And what I'm doing here is you see if I pan the map here, it updates based on the center of the map. It's showing me where I am in both the geographic and the schematic. And likewise, if I move this around, you know, it'll show me where I am on the geographic. Isn't that fun? And you know this is the Foro API because you can do this. Woo! That's kind of neat. Had no idea it did that until after I wrote the code. And I was like, wow, if I right-click, it can do that. That's neat. But behind the scenes on this, if we look at this code, it's exactly the same. So there I have a function that I created that's just point to LRS. And the pattern is exactly the same. So there's your query parameters. Again, I'm constructing a geometry here. That's what this part is. I'm putting it into a query parameters here as JSON. And then I'm using Esri request to pass it. It looks a little bit different, but the functions are basically the same. And if you want this code, I'd be happy to give it to you as well. But all that this, I mean, this looks kind of fancy, but all that this is doing is what I've taught you thus far. It's doing geometry to measure. So as I pan this over, the trick here is that the schematic and the geographic are calibrated exactly the same. So that if I click a point on the schematic and get the measure there, I can find the corresponding location in the geographic by measure. So I do geometry to measure, and then I do measure to geometry in the geographic, and that's how I crosswalk between the two. And then you can do other things, like if I scroll down here. I'm also doing funky stuff with these bars down here. Don't even look at that. That is just smoke and mirrors. I'm embarrassed to have it, that I left it up there. Ideally, what you would do and what people really want to do is have something like a straight line diagram representation along with this. I did a straight line diagram by actually creating a map and using offsets to render it as parallel lines. Don't do that. What I would do instead is do a query against the events and simply plot them in a JavaScript window in a straight line representation. So anyway, I don't have any examples of that, but it's just math. Here I've got some pop-ups that will launch the Roadway Characteristics editor at that, I keep saying Roadway, the event editor at that location. So really, everything that I've taught you so far, it's just JavaScript is all that's going on here. And in this case, I'm working with, if I go up and look at this code, it's just a couple of different maps. So it's two maps. I'm populating both of them from Web Maps and ArcGIS Online, and I'm plotting the data in there, and then calling these geometry to measure functions. All right, next step. I'll get through the next ones quick, because, well, there's not a demo theater after this, so I might go 5 or 7 minutes late because I started 7 minutes late. That's only fair. The next step I wanted to show you is right here. This one and this one. So one of the big capabilities of roads and highways is the ability to synchronize with external business systems. So if I go in and I update the route system in my GIS, but I've got a business system over here that just has tabular information with route and measure, I need to be able to programmatically update that external business system. And Roads and Highways gives you functions that you can call to do exactly that. Now this little web map here, this is just illustrating the concept. So if you look at this, this is what the roadway looked like before the change. And then what happened if we zoom in here, you can see it was realigned right over here. So that in this scenario, they actually went out, ripped up the pavement, and laid down new pavement to reshape that road, okay? And along that section of road, we've got a crash that occurred. Now, in traditional LRS, if you went into just the core tools in ArcMap and you reshaped this line, what would happen to that crash? It would move over. And what would that be? Horrible, right? That would be horrible. Because that crash didn't happen on that pavement, it happened on this other pavement over here. All right, so if we're laying down new pavement, we need to have the system maintain the integrity of the data that exists on that pavement. And that's exactly what Roads and Highways does. So this is just looking at two different time slices, before and after. So it retired that data as of that timestamp and through that area, and it updated everything downstream accordingly. So this crash right here, there we go. If I look at the pop-up there, it's at measure 1.9, but because of the way that road was reshaped, the measures have changed. And you can see if I look at it after, I see that it has different measure values. So Roads and Highways takes care of all that behind the scenes. The point that I want to make for external systems is those can be updated by using the Relocate Events geoprocessing tool and then publishing it as a service. I go back, nope. If I go back here, sorry, I know I'm jumping around a lot, but back here, one of the links I have is for the Roads and Highways geoprocessing documentation. All right, so if you go to that, it'll show you all the geoprocessing tools that are specific to roads and highways. And there's really a lot here. People don't really realize how much is here. But there's some great ones for detecting validity of your events and things like this. But write down, and generate routes, that's a good one. Relocate events. This is the one that you call to inform external systems about what has changed in the underlying route system and how a particular external event needs to be updated. A lot of details there, but there's the documentation for it. Here I am. This is just a simple example that uses the web app builder as a front end to that geoprocessing service. So you think of, I've got a web service sitting out there. I'm using web app builder here to call that web service, and it's reporting back to me where all of my crashes, this is along where that road was realigned, crashes and pavement sections need to be updated because of a change in the route system. And it can do fun things like download and view attribute table and all that stuff. That's just built into web app builder. Most of the way, outside of roads and highways, what I've seen in DOTs is most of them handle this by email. Like they'll update the route and then email the organization and say, route 4582973652.9.823 just got updated in some way. And then you figure it out. But this geoprocessing service would allow you to see exactly how events would need to be changed based on that route change. Can you stay with me for 5 more minutes? It's cool. I think it's cool. All right, so one of the things that I know a lot of people want to do is, and I really hope this works, they want to go out in the field and collect assets using this, and then have that be reflected in the linear referencing system. And the trouble is that collector, and I shouldn't show you all my apps. No, not BA, no, collector. Let me reload this map. You can't edit events directly using collector. It just, because they're M enabled, it will stop you from doing it. So how can I take data that's collected with collector here and update my events with it? Well, the way that I dealt with this is if you think about it, like in the field, I'm going to collect features, and then from those features, I'm going to generate events, right? So it creates this separation from what I'm collecting in the field and the actual events. I probably shouldn't do that because, anyway. So let me show you what that looks like. So I zoom in on this section of road, and I'm going to click on a route. Now in this case, I set it up so that I have to be specific about the route that I'm working on. So if I want to add a guardrail along this particular route, I show the details, and then I go down here and I have a related record for guardrails. I'm going to click New Guardrail. I'll do it on the left. And then if I were actually doing this, I would be using the GPS. I'm not in Indiana right now, so that wouldn't work. I put in the guardrail type. Let's say it's concrete. And then I submit it. All right, so there, I've just updated a guardrail feature, and then I can, in the back end, take that feature, turn off AirPlay. Take that feature and run a script that will take that feature and use the geoprocessing function. Well, no. It uses the web services that we've already talked about, geometry to measure. So if I take the geometry from that, it's called geometry to measure, I can pass in the route ID because I created a relationship between my route and the guardrail feature. So I can pass in the route ID, and you end up with a Python script that looks like this. I have a configuration for it up here where it just has the URLs for the REST endpoints. But basically, I'm not going to go through all this code because it's a lot of code. Suffice it to say, it does geometry to measure, and then it calls apply updates. Those two functions. And when I run this, what you end up with is it will generate an event, and it's just reporting out to me there we go. What event that's created there. Oh, got to share my, sorry. Come back, collector. There we are. All right. So once that's run, I gotta like do some zooming and panning tricks to get it to refresh. Come on. There we go. Yay! So it created an LRS event. That's the purple line that's on the roadway from that feature that I collected out in the field. And if I click on that, I can see it has all the same attributes of the feature that I collected in the field. So now from doing LRS reporting using the roadway reporter function or some tool or something like that, I can get the actual LRS representation of that feature. I've got another way to do this. In this case, I had the user go out and actually digitize the full feature. Another approach is just for them to digitize the start and end point and have it figure out the area in between. I've got another piece of code that does that. All of this is out on GitHub. So you can steal my code, please do, and make it better. It's out there on GitHub, github.com/GISTom, and then under there is I'm GIS Tom. I got in there early, ground floor, and then there's a field edits to LRS tools. That has all the Python code that I just went through right there. If you want any of the other stuff, let me know. I'll be happy to post that for you. Anyway, that's all I have. Thank you very much. It was a pleasure.